Welcome to another episode of The Watchdog with me, Lowkey, here on Mint Press News. Please do support us in any way you can on Patreon. We are 1,000,000% independent and really do need all the help we can get. This week on The Watchdog, where we investigate the powerful, we have a very special guest who has come to the country just recently and is not here for long. So I appreciate her being able to do this interview with us today. The very well-known, very troublesome Palestinian writer, Susan Abulhawa, is here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lowkey. It's an honor.
Honored to have you here. Now, of course, during the genocide, you are one of the few people based in the West or living in the West who actually entered Gaza not just once, but twice. Can you tell us, how was that experience?
Yeah, and to be honest, I wish I never left. I left thinking I was going to come back in a couple of months to resupply and bring back in, medicines and supplies that were badly needed. And but then Israel took over the Mabar, the crossing, and nothing's, and so they're in complete control at this point. But and I've said this before, I think nothing can really convey the magnitude, the enormity, the totality of what Israel is doing. And this was apparent to me, even in a small area of the Strip for a brief period of time. It has honestly changed my life in a way that is sometimes difficult to put into words. But when you see, as a Palestinian, and also as an Iraqi, we're no strangers to learning about and seeing massacres and all manner of oppression and injustice heaped upon us. But it was so overwhelming and all-encompassing. The terror that Israel has brought to Gaza is in every corner. It's behind every tree. There are no trees left, actually. It's a very few, but you feel the breath of death everywhere. People who were one day planning to go to college, planning to get married, thinking about starting a business, expecting a baby, planning a wedding, were the next day trying to figure out where to get bread from, how to get clean water, where to go to the bathroom, how to stay dry when it rains. The indignity, the humiliation, the hopelessness, the fear, it's layer upon layer upon layer of depravity, of inhumanity, of the worst human impulses you can imagine, all of it concentrated in one place and weighed on one people's lives. It's just, I'm a writer, and I truly to this day struggle with the right words to really convey how horrific it really is. And one of the things I've stressed in interviews after I came out is that what people are seeing in the West, and the people who actually bother to look, are the moments of spectacular violence, right? Of horrific burning people alive, shredding bodies, beheaded babies. But beneath that and all around it and on top of it lies this massive space of hunger, of thirst, of insecurity, of hopelessness, of fear, of where like life is so precarious and everybody's just teetering on the edge of a precipice, and all they want to do is protect their children, and everybody's making peace with dying. And it's just, and at this point right now, after nearly 2 years of a Holocaust, people in Gaza are like, I just wish they would just drop a nuclear bomb and get it over with. That's, I talked to young children who told me that they would just like to die, and you're a father, I'm a mother. I don't know what to do with those words that are, that, sort of collide with each other in my head. We set up a school. It's a Band-Aid, ultimately. Israel in a short period of time has decimated generations. If this were to stop today, we're going to be fighting this war within ourselves for generations. The trauma is so extensive, and I don't think any of us really understand the extent of it. I remember in one of the hospitals where I went for several days to just there were babies in incubators who had nobody, just babies. There were a couple whose names were not even known. They were just pulled, and they were all newborns, and they were just in incubators. Nobody was holding them except to feed them. They would just reach in. The nurses were overwhelmed, and so I would go every day and just try and just give them some human touch. And these babies are going to grow up, and what's going to happen to them? There are so many of these children, and it's intentional. Israel targets our children. They will deny it, of course, but all the evidence is to the contrary. And it's not just in Gaza. They've been targeting our children for decades. They did it in the first Intifada. They go for the schools first thing. They bomb the schools. They hit the children. And you hear soldiers sometimes in their testimonies have said, we have to get them young to make them afraid of us. And so they terrify them young, and the things they do to them in prison. Yeah. It's just such an evil entity on this earth. It's really a cancer on humanity. I don't care what anybody says. I think Israel needs to be wiped off the earth.
You visited Gaza during which periods exactly? Which periods exactly were you there?
So I think the first was February to March.
That's 2024.
Yeah. Right. And then March to May was the second trip.
Right.
So I went out. I went out for 3 weeks. I resupplied.
Right.
Went back in. It was kind of like a loophole. I felt like, I discovered a loophole to the,
right.
Because all the convoys that were going in, it was all medical convoys and so forth, were told, to limited amount of luggage and whatnot. And the first group that I went in with, I was like, no way. The worst thing that can happen is that they take the bags, right? It's better to go in with too many than too few.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking we'd slip 100 jneas to the Egyptians or something, whatever. But none of that was necessary because the Egyptians were looking for weapons and drugs, and everything else got in. So the first trip I had close to 30 pieces of luggage.
Right.
Our van was the only one. It had a mountain of luggage on top. And so everybody else in our group did the same because everybody else started getting more stuff. And then the second trip I took, I was I'd wised up, we're going to, and I was able to get over 40 pieces of luggage. And I got my own car to go in. And again, it's a Band-Aid, right? But it was, we brought in medicines, and for me, like, I literally just had one change of clothes. It was everything I had was in a backpack, and I had, like, all my food was just like a bunch of protein bars, and everything else was like medicines. It was toys, it was sanitary napkins, hygiene kits, clothes, shabashib. People needed shoes, like that was like such a luxury. It's to have shabashib. Everybody needed them.
Like slippers.
Yeah. Sorry,
It's okay.
shabashib. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my plan was, I was also bringing in like personal water filtration devices, insulin, tents, whatever. And
that's really life-saving. I mean, insulin, for example, this is really life-saving stuff.
And it was supposedly, it was disallowed, by the way, by the Israelis, by Kogat. You're not allowed to bring in insulin. So, but the Egyptians, like, again, they were just looking for weapons and drugs.
لا سمح الله يعني الأسلحة تدخل غزة يعني.
تخيل. Yeah. I would have taken them if I could, Maybe that's a crime to say here in the UK. I don't know, but it's not in the US.
No.
Yeah, but I mean, I should be clear about that. Like, I have enormous respect and admiration and love for every fighter holed up underground, risking their lives. Like, I want to cry just thinking about it, to be honest. Like, these are people with their whole lives ahead of them who are just putting everything on the line for the love of their people, to be free.
When you think of the history of resistance movements in the world, it was the Vietnamese that were able to defeat the Americans with the underground tunnels and the punji traps, whereby the Americans would walk and fall into traps that had spikes underneath. And I do believe that history will look back and say that there are groups of people that, when faced with the most technologically advanced killing machines that have ever been known to humanity, which are hunting down people, robots, like that level of cowardice, the height of cowardice to be able to kill people with flying machines from a distance, that there are those that found within themselves the courage, the fortitude, the belief in a better world to fight back in some ways. History will tell that story, and history will not smile upon those who have had any involvement in this. And I also would want people to think that your grandchildren, depending on your activity during this time, will either take pride in you or take shame in you. Your legacy during this time will be a source of pride or shame to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, depending on what you did during this period of human history, and particularly regarding this issue and how you responded to this population of millions of people trapped in a high-tech goldfish bowl in which they are being slaughtered systematically. How did you respond to those people? Did you reach out for their hand? Did you hold on to their hand? Did you keep holding their hand? And did you fight in your own corner in what ways you could? You have also recently been part of what is seen by some to be a controversy at the Oxford Union. I participated in a debate there quite a few years ago. Would you like? I mean, your speech there was absolutely riveting, touching, on many levels, and really gave the viewer the feeling of the pious hypocrisy of Zionism, of the double standard of Zionism, the inhumanity of this political idea, and also the human consequences of it, rather than dealing with it in the abstract and the theoretical, which sort of prioritizes someone's emotional connection to this violent settler colonial idea. You brought it into these are the human consequences of it. And imagine if it was flipped around. What would your response be? So it's directly appealing to that sense of hypocrisy in the listener.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're talking about Oxford Union, these are people who I've never been to as self-satisfied a place as the Oxford Union. It may have been a bit different and a bit more somber when you were there. But these young people are being imbued deeply with a sense of their own importance, with a sense that they will go on to manage the world, that they are budding darlings of the establishment. And so you brought this searing reality to that place, and you sought to destabilize some of those certainties that they may have around Zionism. So that was fantastic to see. However, after you launching that piece and it being very warmly supported and received by many, many people on the internet, hugely popular, it then was subject to censorship of some kind. Can you just tell us about that process?
Yeah. So first, I want to just comment on the self-satisfied nature of that lot. It happened that the president of the Oxford Union himself, Ibrahim Moafi, was is Egyptian. He's Muslim, and he was willing to take this on. But that self-satisfaction sort of extends to this idea that their way of life is the epitome of civilized, and it includes all of these catchphrases that they lecture us with and beat us over the head with, of democracy and freedom of speech, freedom of expression, etc. So it was really ironic that they then censored my speech. So Ibrahim Osman Moafi, his tenure as president ended just a few days after that debate. A few days after it was uploaded, all the speeches were uploaded. And the new president who came in apparently succumbed to the pressures to censor mine, to edit. So within the span of 5 days, the speech had garnered over like 250,000 views on YouTube. And the Al Jazeera had done like one of those little sort of montage, just sort of clips and put them together. That had garnered like 5 million. So it was going viral. And I started getting messages on like less than a week later that, hey, Susie, the link is not working. So I go on YouTube, I search, I'm like, oh no, there it is. And then I realized it was shorter. And somebody on Twitter, somebody on social media said, it's definitely shorter. Here it is from, the Wayback Machine, archive.org. And here are the parts that they took out. So they edited like 10-second clips here and there and there. And the ultimate result was like, it was about a minute and almost 2 minutes shorter. And the parts they took out were, so for example, there was one part where I mentioned very well documented episode in Zionist terrorism in which they booby-trapped toys, children's toys, with bombs and left them and dropped them basically in southern Lebanon. And so all these children were excited.
This is historical fact.
It's historical fact. It's documented in UN reports, in local media at the time, in testimonies, in medical reports. It's not disputed, except by liars like Zionists. And so I referenced that when Israeli soldiers left booby-trapped toys in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon. So they took that out. They took out a part where I said, where I was speaking directly to Zionists, and I said that I'm speaking to Zionists, that it was clear that you don't know how to live in the world without dominating others. That's my experience, and that's true. That's objectively true. They took out parts like that. Everything that they took out can be backed up with objective fact, irrefutable evidence. And it was ostensibly because they said it was incitement to racial hatred. And I guess there was some kind of Supreme Court or court ruling in the UK that distinguished Zionism from Judaism, and therefore anti-Zionism from anti-Semitism. And so I have lawyers who are in communication with the Oxford Union. And it's not clear yet what the result will be, but I am insisting that they either remove it entirely or upload the original, because they have no right to edit. Like, I worked on this.
So your assertion is that this is a form of discrimination against you on the basis of your anti-Zionist beliefs?
Absolutely. That's one of my assertions.
Yeah.
Another assertion is that this is my intellectual property. I'm a writer.
Yeah.
And I'm very careful about my words, especially written words. Like, I didn't get up there and speak off the cuff. I wrote something that I worked on and very deliberately.
Your entire life.
Exactly.
It was a product of an entire life.
And my family's life, my history.
As a subject of Zionism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for them to go and pervert my words in such a way, in particular, there's also some other like legal details, because when I got there and I realized that, actually prior to me arriving, and I realized that nobody was allowed to record inside, that they were the only ones recording, they agreed. I wrote a writer, and they agreed to it. That none of my speech would be edited. I didn't want anything edited out.
Yeah.
I didn't want interruptions edited. I didn't want my words edited.
Yeah.
And so I had that writer. That was an agreement that I had from them, but they still did it. And what's interesting is that that guy Musab Yusuf, that traitor, said verbatim, Palestinians are the most pathetic people in the world.
And of course, they've left that in.
And they left that in.
Yeah.
But they don't consider that incitement to racial hatred. I mean, and yet me really just expressing documented fact somehow is.
So where have they said that it was about an incitement?
Yes.
They said that explicitly?
Yeah. I can show you the letters. I mean,
where that comes from?
The UK lawyers for Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we know they're behind it.
That's the same basis for them trying to remove my music from Spotify. Incitement.
Yes, I remember that.
Thank you for signing the letter. I appreciate that. You signed the letter to help us keep the music there. Right. So as it stands now, there's legal wrangling over what will and won't happen to that video. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see.
But I have uploaded the original one onto my. I don't have a YouTube channel, but I do now. I have had an old thing, so I just put it on there. So I guess I do have a YouTube channel, but it's but it's there. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you also wrote an introduction to the book by Rifat al-Arir.
Allah yarhamah.
Allah yarhamah, the Palestinian writer who was targeted with his family by Israel in Gaza. Could you tell us first about the book and then about who Rifat was and why it's important that people should study him, study his work, study his teaching, and what he can tell the rest of the world about humanity?
Rifat was, he was a light. He was just light and love and resistance and defiance and intellect and wit and loyalty and friendship. He was a father, a son, a brother, a provider, a friend, a mentor, a teacher, an intellectual. He was a threat. Rifat was somebody who cared deeply about humanity, about justice, about his people, about art, about his family, about our history. He was tenacious. He was really focused on young people. He wanted to empower generations with the pen. Rifat and I had discussions on several occasions about language, because he felt it was really important for Palestinians to communicate in English and to be fluent in the language of the people who were oppressing them. He believed in people's goodness, and he came to this country and he met a lot of Americans, and he believed.
He came to the US.
Oh yes, sorry, US. Sorry,
okay.
yeah. Well,
I wish he did.
Yeah.
Was he here?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he came to the UK or not. I thought he did, but I might be wrong. But he definitely came to the US on multiple occasions, and he met a lot of Americans, and he believed that if they just knew, if they would only see what Israel has been doing to us, that they wouldn't stand for it. And I think that sort of propelled him. I am of a different belief, and as somebody who writes in English, who is like, I'm wounded by the fact that I cannot write the way I want to in Arabic. I mean, I'm literate in Arabic and I can read and write, but it's not sophisticated enough to the point that I can write novels in it. And that's one of, like, that's like an ache in my heart. And I would, we used to have these debates because I want us to go back to our mother tongue. I want us to make Arabic precious again, because it's a stunning language. It is so replete with texture and poetry and expression.
And words that have no synonym in English.
Exactly.
Which, when you look at, nakhwa, for example.
Nakhwa, dala, ghurbe. There's so many, yeah. And also, like, I was writing a piece recently about animals. And it was actually about animals in Gaza under the genocide, because other life doesn't get counted. I mean, it's horrific enough for humans, but Israel has wiped out animal life. There's hardly any insects left. The birds. I mean, Palestine, especially Wadi Gaza, was a really, really important stop for bird migrations between Africa and Europe and Asia. And they've obliterated. So there's species are going extinct right now because of this. Whole species of salamanders are going extinct because of this. Insects, wildlife, everything is getting, trees, plant life. They're obliterating. So I was writing this piece, and it occurred to me that, like, the word "it" in English does not have a corollary in Arabic. Because everything is alive in Arabic. You use the same pronoun for a woman that you would use for a tree, right? It's living, and there's something. It really struck me about the coldness, the inanimacy of, and also the primacy of humans in the English language. How that sort of develops, or maybe shapes, the way people think, the ideas of supremacy. Sorry, I'm going into the weeds right now, but I am somebody who is concerned with language, and
it makes me think of there's a poem by Mahmoud Darwish called "The House as a Casualty," and it goes through the house and the objects within it, and the things that those mean to human life, and seeing the house as we're seeing in Gaza every single day. Houses are. And then the way the sort of houses are weaponized against the human, because when a person dies from bombing of their home, it will be because the ceiling that they've just looked at in this mundane way for all of their life, they've lied on their bed and looked up at the ceiling, that one day that ceiling will
Betray them.
Betray them.
Yeah.
And with Grenfell as well, it was made me, because I lived in the area for many years. A friend of mine died in there. I was there on the night. The walls became weapons in a way, or the walls became threats to life. So it's a fascinating part of the story.
That sheltered you, that held your stories, that where you kept your secrets, that kept you warm, kept you cool, gave you privacy, gave you love, suddenly are taking your life.
Yeah.
And I mean, I talk to my friends in Gaza every day. And the things that they've become accustomed to, like when they sit down and think about it, it's like they don't recognize themselves anymore. I mean, these are people who lived relatively comfortable lives.
Yeah.
Who've become accustomed to using a public bathroom that's shared by 500 other people. And when they stop and think about the indignity, it collapses them in some ways. And they've been betrayed by everybody and everything, by people, by walls, by the rain, by the sun, by the sand. Everything is betraying them. Everybody is betraying them. Everybody, it feels like the whole world is ganged up on them.
I wondered what you see in the Palestine Action movement. What is your perception of what has been achieved here? Just so the viewers understand, Palestine Action was launched in 2022. Since then, it has carried out over 500 operations against Israeli arms factories and companies invested in Israeli arms, the Israeli arms industry in this country. It has successfully shut down 2 Israeli arms factories permanently. It has forced the selling of 2 subsidiaries of Elbit Systems in this country. Elite KL in Tamworth used to make cooling units for the Israeli Merkava tanks, which you may have seen online looking worse for wear. An Elite KL, thanks to Palestine Action, was forced to leave Tamworth, and now the same factory makes cooling units for London buses. In addition to that, Ferranti Technologies was a subsidiary of Elbit Systems in Oldham, and it was procured for £12 million and then sold at a loss, and in the end sold for £9 million, thanks to the activity of Palestine Action in the local community. In addition to that, Elbit Systems' head office in London was shut permanently by Palestine Action, and you have seen over a dozen companies cut ties permanently with Elbit Systems thanks to the activity of Palestine Action, including the British government cancelling the Watchkeeper drone project with Elbit Systems, which was worth £2 billion. So the achievements of Palestine Action are legion, and it's important also to know that this has taken place in the scope of an unprecedented campaign against it by the established Palestine solidarity movement globally. And that's not to point out division, that's just to point to the fact that like they say in Yemen, التصعيد بالتصعيد. The escalation with escalation. So as Israel has escalated, the parties that have escalated in turn and have said that our solidarity with Palestinians and Lebanese and Yemeni and Syrians goes beyond the established ways of activity post-Oslo. Post-Oslo, it became about NGOs. It became about lobbying governments on the basis of international law. It became about non-violent pressure.
Non-revolutionary.
It
Non-liberatory.
was non-liberatory. It was the idea of an oasis of international law would arrive us to a more just settlement. the type of language that
And
would
yet
be
it has
used.
arrived us at genocide.
It has arrived us as genocide. Those of us that chose to escalate without exception, including Oxford Union with yourself as an example, have been besieged. Yeah, in a obviously far different way to Gaza, but in a symbolic way, besieged in that way. And so Palestine Action has driven ahead regardless of the campaign against it. Now you, as somebody that has a history within the wider movement, has not been shy. You have not been shy about directly stating your support for Palestine Action. And that is something that, is received with deep gratitude and made a lot of difference, actually, in terms of the conversations that took place around statements that you made.
Really?
It was seen as a very special thing.
Oh, wow. That actually means a lot to hear that. No, I'm glad because honestly, I would kiss the hands of every Palestine Action activist. And so let me just first comment on the so-called solidarity organizations who have openly opposed this. I think it's one thing to not embrace certain tactics. That's one thing. But to come out and condemn them is an entirely different matter. And it makes them suspect in my view. And people who do that really are unworthy of being called a Palestine Solidarity organization. And here's my logic. There's protests are important, right? Boycott is important. All these things are important. But the system allows for it, right? They're kind of built into the system that, you got your free speech zones, basically. It becomes like a venting valve in the war machine, right? Where people can just come and chant and scream and then go home and say we did something. But it's in the face of what we're seeing, it's clearly not enough. We don't pose a threat. And unless we can find a way to be a threat to them, nothing is going to change. And that's what I think is so brilliant about Palestine Action, is that they have become a threat. They're threatening the bottom line. They're shutting them down. They are a real inconvenience. Having us scream in the streets is not an inconvenience. It's just, they're letting us do it.
It's part of the performance of democracy.
It's the performance, exactly. And it's also something to allow people to feel self-satisfied, to feel like they did something. And for people to vent, to get this, to sort of allow the escape of the horrors that we're witnessing. But if you really do something for the people who are so vulnerable and defenseless against the most advanced death technology, we have to take risks. And if you're not willing to take a risk, you're not effective. Yeah. And I think, that's what Palestine Action is doing. They are risking their liberty. They are risking their futures, and they are risking their lives. Yeah. And their physical safety. And they're doing it for people they may never know. And to me, that is the best of humanity. That is the best human impulse. That is such a noble expression of love. And I really just can't give Palestine Action enough love for that.
Thank you so much. It's been great speaking to you. Unfortunately, time is against us today. We hope that you'll be able to come back at some point and we'll be able to have another conversation. That would be great.
Thanks for having me, Lowkey. It's really lovely to be here.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in today. The Watchdog, please do like, share and subscribe to help us with the algorithm. Peace and love.